Okay, Petra, go ahead.
Okay, great. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. We are live. It's good to see you all. I'm so glad you're here and joining us for our panel today, Land, Language, Survival, Women Eco-Writers. This is a panel that originally formed for last year's AWP. We then had a truncated form of this in this year's AWP, but we're also just so glad to give this to you who are mainly our Practices of Hope community. Practices of Hope was an issue that most of us were in. Many of us are associated with the Black Earth Institute, a think tank, a collection of people who want to think about spirituality, the land, the environment together. So we're just delighted to be here with you, and we're going to read in the following order. We're still waiting for one of our presenters, Margaret Noodin, who hopefully will be with us very soon. We have a sense there might be some time zone stuff going on. So we're going to start with Pam Uschuk. We're going to then have DJ Lee and Fisher-Wirth and Petra Kuppers, me, and Meg Noodin is going to slide in when she's joining us. So please enjoy these wonderful poets. It's just been a delight to be on the journey with them all. It's been a delight to be on the journey with so many of our contributors from Practices of Hope. And I hope this will be a really wonderful way of celebrating the 1-year anniversary of our special issue. And with that, I turn it over. First of all, actually, I forgot to just greet you also here from Anishinaabe territory. I am in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I sit in Turtle Disco, the small somatic writing studio that I work from, and we're here on Anishinaabe territory. And I would love to hand it over now to Pam. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, Petra, and thank you, DJ, and thank you, Anne. It's such a pleasure to see you and to read with you today. I'd like to acknowledge that I live and write on Tohono O'odham ancestral lands, and I am reading today from the Sonoran Desert, Tucson, Arizona. I live in two landscapes, Tucson, the Sonoran Desert, and also southwestern mountains of Colorado. In 2012, I underwent surgery for stage 3 ovarian cancer just 2 weeks after my diagnosis. I was in shock and hadn't fully absorbed the enormity of my disease. What I knew was that it was highly likely I would die. 1 in 12 ovarian cancer patients survive, not great odds. I was determined to be that 1 in 12. Nearly 9 years later, I am still alive. I am thriving. A big part of my healing has been my deep connection with wild beings, plants, trees, animals, rivers, mountains, deserts. I have often come either to the mountains or the desert to heal. The wild is a tonic, a medicine. Sir Lawrence Vanderpost wrote, "Desert is the stark mirror in which we see our most abandoned, uncared for selves." I say desert is a mirror in which our abandoned selves see our most vibrant possibilities. The Sonoran Desert is neither barren nor hostile nor empty. This ancestral homeland of the Tohono O'odham people teems with life. I recognize relatives all around. When I was sicker than I've ever been, I called on those relatives to help me. Southwestern Colorado is a special ecozone where desert meets alpine. In Colorado, we live on Southern Ute ancestral homeland, near the clear flow of Los Pinos River and near horse and cattle ranches. Communing with horses is as healing for me as communing with eagles, mountain bluebirds, and bears who also live there. The Southwest Mountains and desert, with their incredibly rich array of birds, reptiles, plants, trees, and lands, are literally two of my most potent doctors. I continue my work as a human rights as well as wilderness rights advocate. These fuel my poetry as well as my spirit. One can never heal oneself without reaching out to help others. That's why we're here, to help one another. I hope these poems help. Dog Walk Song for Bill, my husband. Past young aspen and punky old balsa, before sunrise unhinges lids from speech. The boy in him walks the dogs to the river. The best part of his day, he says. Autumn river swiveling to grind the stones of his imagination, carrying ice from the spring that cracks granite at 13,000 feet, where forget-me-nots, blood drops small, breed late, where eagle feeds on bowls, and a bull elk swells his thick neck, bugling to mate. Above him, magpies rock the pear tree, shading the grave of the wolf who lopes underground, grave of his wild white heart gone to the stars. The boy in him laughs at the new pup, shaped like something between a black bear and a buffalo, stumbling and biting through his own leash. The boy in him has given up restraint, mind careening free as the torrent pouring over boulders, cutting through the park named after eagles, who will return with first snow. The boy in him walks the dogs to this river, he kayaks to his further life, carved from wolf willows of hope, bent by storm and offering themselves supple to wind's knife, whittling hawk song, late wild bloom, shadow swell, deer licked dawn. Cracking 100. Near the border, preschoolers worry about butterflies. How can they fly over the wall? 20 feet tall, thick steel plates would sear delicate wings. And lizards, miss? How can they get through? Small fingers draw orange wings crashing into steel, lizards hanging their blue heads. Y el tigre? Severing ancient migration paths, the wall will ensure the jaguar's end. Just after Cinco de Mayo, daytime temps crack the knuckles of 100, 10 degrees above normal. No wall can stop rising heat, the death of coral reefs, or the governor calling for the National Guard to secure the border. Then holding cells, children separated from parents, wait for a future no one can predict. And in the San Joaquin Valley, strawberries and tomatoes rot in fields. Farmers wonder where the pickers have gone. Immaculate in his Armani suit, the president tweets for congressional support to build his wall, calls for a prayer meeting in the Oval Office. You can hear Bible hymns hum behind bulletproof doors, across the lush White House lawn, where monarch butterflies, who've migrated all the way from Mexico, land on bright rose petals, tended by hands the same color as earth that nourishes them. Refugee, for Terry Acevedo. Since January, sun can't stop shivering. Hope shakes her head, refuses to step inside the front door. So we drive to San Javier Mission, smudged with mesquite smoke, the 1,000 melted roses of perfumed candle wax. Worn out, we retreat from paranoid tweets, the confused sleight of hand from the commander-in-chief. Incarcerating migrant children along the border is the strategy of lies. Under white bell towers, time reverses its hungry grind, patted by the hands of autumn women, stretching dough to drop on hot tops of burned barrels, attended by dogs and children's laughter, as soft as sand they walk. We enter the cathedral, eyed by red archangels, as we dip fingers in bowls of holy water, our urgent need to cool nerves scraped raw by the cries of children and toddlers, ripped by federal agents from parents seeking asylum in our country that's lost its heart. The 1,000 flames of votives offer no solution near San Francisco's effigy, serene under blue satin. It said he grants miracles to those who lift his sacred head. Since the election, mass on the reservation is packed. Entering San Diego Capilla, we enter our own wounds, say intentions for the dead, for the health of friends, for love to end public lies so loud we've become deaf to every crisis cry. We inhale the multiplicity of candle flames till our chests burst. We stroll across the burning scalp of desert sun to ramadas fashioned from ocotillo and ironwood trunks, to buy fry bread crisp with grease, tortillas so thin you can see your fingers waving on the other side. Green flame. Slender as my ring finger, the female hummingbird crashed into plate glass, separating her and me before we could ask each other's name. Green flame, she launched from a dead eucalyptus limb. Almost on impact, she was gone, her needle beak opening twice to speak the abrupt language of her going. Taking in the day's rising heat as I took one more scalding breath, horrified by death's velocity, too weak from chemo not to cry for the passage of her emerald shine, I lifted her weightlessness into my palm. Mourning doves moaned, hoo, hoo, oh, hoo, while her wings closed against the tiny body. Sky would quick forget as soon as it would forget mine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. That is lovely. Thank you so much, Pam. It was wonderful to hear you. And Meg is with us now, and I would love it if you could go next, Meg. Thank you, Margaret Noodin. And I just want to make sure at this point to just say many, many thanks, as usual, to DJ, who is doing all the tech for us and is just a whiz who makes it all happen. So thank you so much, DJ. Pam, wonderful work. And I'm handing it over to Margaret Noodin. And I have now figured out how to put the bios into the YouTube box. So I will put all the bios there rather than read them out here. So Meg, over to you. Thank you.
Miigwech. Nice to be here. And I'll start out with a chickadee poem, which, as you know, will come out a bit like a song. And I will find that one here in the chickadee book. And I will read it in English first so people know what the meaning is, and then they can hear it and enjoy it. So in English, I have no way, I write them first in Ojibwe, and so you'll hear how that works. But so you have the meaning, I'll read you the English. In English, the title is Chickadee. The ancestors tied and extended it, the sweet grass, telling us to make bundles. The world is not yet ripe. The marsh chickadee is there in the white pine, calling out, wanting to be with us. It's a ceremony, a way to be alive. And the way the poem was written, Hanakubijikana, Hanakubidua, Wingash, Windamawi Youngidwa, Kashkibijike, Gegashka King. Gijikijikaneshi, Heyagawanda, Nundagasi, Nundemi Youngidwa, Manadukeyum, Manaduiyum. That is the poem for the chickadees, the ones that are around us all the time, most of the year, and we see those. The other poem that I'll read is one that we translated based on a saying that will be familiar to those who study the Dalai Lama. In Anishinaabemowin, the quote that we base the poem on, Bimadzajik ga gishinendagazik, jizagigot, gegun ga gishinendagwadon, ji objchigadek, nongum gegun unzam zagigowat, gae bimadzajik, abudjigowat wenje majishawelok. People were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. Today, things are sometimes loved and people are used. And that is the reason for bad happenings. And that was the 14th Dalai Lama who said that. And my friend Bernie Perley, who is Maliseet, is an amazing artist. He did some images based on that statement. And so this is the poem that I wrote in response to that. It's called The Ones Alive. Bimadazajik, Jizagi Youngudwa, Jizagi Youngidwa, Agami Zagagin Zagajawel, Gejeminido, Gejaninjige, Gaknagegun, Beshik, Gijik, Gizis, Gijabakizit, Gijanendamawin, Gaye, Gijananenguan, Nidash, Piche, Giwitash Kamagak, Gitjanendizo young, Jazagi young Gedwa, Jazagi young Gedwa. Jamikamong, Jamik Wendamong, Goknigegong, Eji Abjichagadek, Jamik Wangidwa, Jamik Wan Minigoda. Bebejik, Bemadzajik, Eji Jawinamongidwa, Minan, Gish Gijigwenga, Gichigaming, Monganongon, Zakwaganit Gijagon. To love and be loved, across the lake, openings begin. The Creator creates all things one by one, the sky, the sun, the moon being full, decisions and rules, and then amidst the turning cycles, we create ourselves to love and be loved, to find and to remember, the use for everything, to find and remember the single blessing of every being, the way every island is embraced by the sea, and the way the North Star is held in the sky. And I'll read one more that, because for me, every poem is actually two, I guess, which isn't quite fair. And this is one that I wrote for my friend, Umpawestewin, Pat Northrup. She's Dakota, and her name means daybreak woman. And again, so that you can have the sense of the poem, what it means before I read it in the Anishinaabe one. This one is strawberry jam, mixing sweet wind and shining water with thick wisdom, pounding, measuring everything we've cared for, everything we've lost, the songs we have not yet sung, the feathers yet to decorate, and all the ways we've smiled, mixed into jars filled to the brim, to be open when we are thin, sleeping deeply in winter, near where the tomatoes once grew. And then in the Anishinaabe one, O te mini paska minsigan ke gina goenat, wishganimat, waseagame, Nidin waki paka ne poka bigish kadat, dibash bigedat, kakina gajawen mangidwa, kakina gawani angidwa, nagamoenan wa nagamoyang, migwana wawaji angidwa, eji jomingwe angoba, Moshkene modaya bikong jibakakanet pibakadeyang ozangwama bibong besho ka ogeni gendaji genebigok. So I have time for one more, just to give you a variety of ways to use our language to address different things in the world. The Chickadee book actually has sort of two sections, things we notice in the world and history, ways of retelling history. And one of the poems was written based on a quote about Radisson, the explorer who did some exploring and found that the squirrels were always eating his bags. He would leave his bags somewhere overnight and find that they had been destroyed by the animals that he encountered on his journey. I felt that it would be interesting to think of what those animals were experiencing during the fur trade. So this is a poem from the perspective of a beaver during the fur trade, you know, mid 1600s maybe. It's called A Time of Confusion. Wa nanamizigat, gawin jichiwonga sewak, jajich bingwenjik, gawin gondan senawa, be shugarawe jijik. Gawin maman o nend na sewa o jibkan awiyang. Gawin nisidot tanzina, gikan wajanget zibe. Wa go shak wa ga shewak. Go manjamandawat jikwakwang. Wa bjeshi geabe bejik on jada omoan wa wabiganujin. Jagash kan dawek nano nakwat. Weneba Jashkazagik, Bin Squab in Winnegak, Ga Maj Tomagak. They don't gnaw the ones who wink. They don't swallow the ones who skin. They don't notice that we are the roots. They don't understand that we guide the river. Bent in the wind, the foxes sniff the edge of the tree line. The pine marten eats one more mouse on purpose. The squirrels have declared war on the lost ones who explode, and the unraveling has begun. I may have time for you. Want me to do one more, or are we done? I'll do one more. I'm trying to watch the time. I'll do one last one, which is actually the last poem in the book. And that one is, this is no conclusion. Gawin mashe gijitasian. Gawin mashe gijitasian. Gawin zegasian. Gikenamagwa anamikik. Ditibase watendang. Misko zivi bashkenidik. Ga ejawebak mada ondiang. Wayango izikak angodnong wanishkwezwagen. Miapane nundawian giwendamayan. This is no conclusion. I am not afraid to know the thunderbirds swirling around my heart, a steaming river of red, of history shared. Sometimes the tame are once again wild, and always you hear me thinking of home. Thanks to everyone for listening and being with us this evening. And I will now enjoy the words of our next poet. I'm not sure I know the order. I return it back to our moderator, Petra.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Thanks so much, Margaret. That was just a wonderful reading, a reading and a singing. As someone with who comes from Germany, the singing of poetry feels in a way like home, you know. So I love hearing it. I love hearing it, and I love hearing it here on Anishinaabe territory. You know, I just imagine the response and the richness here, and I just love hearing you read. And everybody, I put into the chat the link to ojibwa.net, where you can hear Meg and others read and sing Anishinaabe poetry. So I encourage you to go there and listen to this wonderful resource. And I'd also love the connections and the weaving that happens between Pam's work and Meg's work. It's just wonderful. And it's going to happen now as we continue on with DJ Lee, who has been just the kind of backbone of this whole series. I'm just so glad that we get to read together here once more. So DJ, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to throw your bio into the chat. All right, off you go.
Thank you so much, Petra. I also just thank Margaret. That was just such a beautiful reading. I love your book. As I told you, I read it on an airplane sort of midway through the last year. And it was just such a comfort to read at that when I was flying that time. And also just thank you to Anne and to Pam. I just feel very close to this group of women, and even though we haven't seen each other for a long time, it just, it's really wonderful to be reading with you. I'm actually in Chicago right now, and that's the homelands of many Indigenous nations and peoples, including the Council of the Three Fires, and one of the largest urban Indigenous communities in the US. I'm going to be reading from my memoir. It's called Remote: Finding Home in the Bitter Roots. And it's the story of how I fell in love with a place. Sorry. It all started with my grandmother on her deathbed. She gave me a box of mysterious items. And it took me a while to open the box, for like a few years. But when I finally did, dare to open and see what was in there. Everything pointed to a massive piece of land in the northern Rockies of Idaho and Montana, a land of granite peaks and pine and cedar forests, wild rivers, and wild animals. What I found out through that box was that she and my grandfather had once lived in that place, that big wild land, unbeknownst to me. I also didn't know, and I found out that it's a designated wilderness area, the largest in the lower 48 states at over 5 million acres with 2 adjoining pieces of land. And that means that there are no roads through that piece of land, and the only way in and out is through horse and mule, bush plane, or backpacking. Once I started traveling there, I couldn't stop. I became obsessed in some ways with going back there and trying to uncover family stories and the history of the place, the natural history as well as the cultural history. But it is a difficult place to survive in, and people do go missing there regularly. So I had to rely on teachers to guide me. One of the most important of those was a man named Dick Walker, who is a wildlife photographer and bush pilot. He now is, I think, in his 80s, and he flies, I think he still flies for the Nimipu tribe and for wilderness activist groups. And he often let me come along on the flights. So the chapter I'm going to read is called Cycles, and it's about halfway through the book. And Dick Walker is a major character. A Chinook salmon is a homing organism. Its whole life pointed to the future through the past. As the fish journeys to the ocean from the creek where it is born, it enacts a process called retracing imprinted memory. Every body of water, every river, creek, stream, and trickle has its own taste, and the fish memorizes the tastes written into the chemistry of each water system. This knowledge enables the salmon to find its way back home. Dick Walker was obsessed with the Selway Chinook. He explained the creature's life cycle until I knew it by heart, until the births, transformations, and migrations felt like my own. The magical part, the part of their lives I kept mulling over, was the Chinook's treacherous voyage from the ocean back to the exact spot where they were born. Salmon swimming up, river flowing down, a perfect tension. Though I knew Dick wasn't my grandfather, I often felt that by following him around, I was walking in my grandfather's shadow. So much so that no matter what I was doing, if Dick called, I would pick up. If he asked me to come on a flight, I would do everything in my power to be there. One August, I was sitting in front of a slot machine at the Las Vegas airport when Dick's name flashed across the phone. I just talked to a fisheries biologist, he said, his voice taut and hard. There's hundreds of salmon swimming up the Selway River right now. Can you be here tonight? I was on my way to Salt Lake for a literature conference, but Dick's urgency became my own. This is going to be the year, he said. I'll be there. I hung up and stared at a slot machine, pulled around by fear and doubt at my willingness to change my plans so readily. But I'd wanted to see the salmon ever since I'd helped Dick hang a photography exhibit the previous year. I was skewered by his image of a half-dead, half-living salmon swimming in an emerald pool, the flesh on its head eaten away. That time's gone, Dick said as we hung the print. That's a spring Chinook. If you really look, you'll see that fish has its adipose fin. That means it's fucking wild. It wasn't clipped in some damned hatchery. And this one isn't even a true wild Chinook, since the salmon that come here now were taken from another water system after the original Chinook died in the dams. What happened to its head? I asked. Probably got nitrogen poisoning or caught in a gill net. I don't know if it's a he or a she, but I call it a she. She came so close to me because she was blind. All the flesh on her face, even her eyes, gone. Her head was nothing but bone and cartilage. That fish came through all those mean-ass rapids, maybe 900 miles, and didn't have no eyes. You know what that means? I shook my head. You don't have to see to get back to the place where you were born. He breathed heavily, and then his face brightened into a smile. Where did you take this? I asked. On a bluff overlooking a pool. Looky here. And he pointed to the bottom right-hand corner where he'd signed his name and penciled in Upper Selway. This pool here, and he swirled his hand on the print. I call it the origin point. It's a Nez Perce fishing spot. His voice grew stern. I don't want people knowing where this place is, so I just write Upper Selway and leave it vague, and I want to keep it that way. Dick, I said, very few people are going to take the trouble to visit a place like that. It's so far away from anywhere. You're paranoid. No, he strutted away. I'm not paranoid. I'm a fucking realist. Then he pivoted toward me and his scowling face said, you have a lot to learn. Dick lives on a mountain in North Idaho. I arrived at his house at midnight, exhausted and still dismayed at how quickly I'd cancel my plans for a chance to see the vanishing Chinook. The next morning, we were wheeling his Cessna out of the hangar in Orofino. Silver with red letters, the plane seemed to have come straight out of World War II, not a fighter jet, but a spotter plane where you might see daylight through the door. We packed carefully to balance the weight. Takeoffs always meant flying low into Dworshak, the massive 700-foot concrete gravity dam on the Clearwater River, the largest of its kind in the Western Hemisphere. Flying straight at Dworshak was terrifying every time. Dick hated the dam. He blamed it for salmon loss. As he had explained, when a salmon makes its way to the ocean, it doesn't swim, it floats. It needs an unhurried but steady pace, the pace of a free-flowing river. Dams slow rivers and salmon die. Fewer salmon in the ocean mean fewer returning to their home in the Selway. So now I'm just gonna skip, share with you another part of this same chapter, just like one more page. So we land on the backcountry airstrip in this wilderness area, and then we have to backpack 6 miles to get to this place, this bluff where Dick first saw the salmon. When we were within half a mile of the origin point, unable to contain myself, I ran ahead of Dick and dropped my pack and peered over the edge. The water was sapphire and smoke, rippling where it touched the bluff. I squinted. We missed them, I called out, and felt myself adjusting to a new version of the origin point and of myself. Was I right to want the creatures so desperately? Getting close to wildlife through Dick held the promise of getting close to my grandfather and his love of wild creatures. A few minutes later, Dick stepped onto the bluff and squatted beside me. There they are, he said in a quiet, musical voice. Where? Right below us. I gazed again into the water, beholding only a surface mottled with sun and shadows. Dick kept looking. I followed. Nothing. Then a dark body came into view. A few more appeared. They hovered in one place. They darted through the water. They disappeared. One shot to the surface, a metal glint from its open mouth, and lunged back down. "They're huge," I said. Dick pulled out his camera and clicked away. The world felt small and quiet. "What are they doing down there?" I said. "What kinds of fishy thoughts are going through their brains? Is coming home to the place you were born a party, or is it sad, like the last breath before death?" Oh no, there's no sadness." Dick was perched on the edge, leaning over a little too far, one hand balancing on the rock. "It probably feels good," I said. "A family reunion." "I don't know." He looked skyward. "Could be." Then Dick began singing, "Swing low, sweet chariot." "They look content," I said. "This would be, in our terminology, a spa life," he said. "Spawn life?" I punned. "Well," and he snapped the lens cap onto his camera, "the gravel is their last big hurrah. She and the male are separated and she starts shaking and it's like a mini orgasm. And then he wiggles and shivers. They're not touching, but they feel each other's vibrations." He stopped talking. We both did. And he put his camera away. We sat there in a feeling too big for words. And the chapter goes on, but I will stop there and give it over to someone whose work I so admire, Anne Fisher-Wirth, but first to Petra.
We could have handed it right on, but thank you so much, DJ. That was wonderful. Thank you. Beautiful reading yet again. And I just love the connections between the hummingbird, the green flame, the beaver, the salmon, you know, these careful observations about relationships and also the gentle reminders of what we project onto the world and what the world might be projecting back onto us. So I love how that's running through everybody here. So thank you so much. And I'm now going to hand it over to Anne Fisher-Wirth, who's become, in distance, quite a friend. We've just been playing together quite a bit. So I'm just so delighted that you're here to read with us.
Thank you so much. It's really great to see all of you and hear all of you again. As it turns out, this piece is a little bit in companionship with Pam's, and she'll know why when I read it. It's called Chronic Illness and Meditation in Mississippi. It's been a hard year and a half, beginning with my sister's illness and death from cancer, and continuing through COVID, a divorce in the family, and my own worsening arthritis, which took me to the hospital for a total hip replacement at the end of December. But recently I've been realizing that this time has been not only hard, frightening, but also precious. I feel lucky to have had the chance to think a lot about death and the fragility of time. Lucky to have lived through these days, which have made me aware how much I love my life, my family, friends, and teaching. Now that I'm in my 70s, I'm relatively more serene than I was in my earlier, more turbulent days. And though some of that is due to age, and a lot of it is due to the wisdom and support I receive from my husband and kids, a lot of it's also due to decades of yoga, meditation, and pranayama, or yogic techniques for breathing. For years, I taught gentle yoga at Southern Star Yoga Center in Oxford, Mississippi. For months recently, though, the studio was closed, and by the time it partially opened again, my hip had deteriorated to the point where I could no longer get up and down without lumbering and groaning, or do most of the poses that used to be so dear to me. So instead, I've started offering free yoga nidra sessions once a week by Zoom to anyone who wants them. We begin with about 20 minutes of simple stretches, poses, and some pranayama. And then after each person silently sets an intention and finds a blessing to hold and to offer to those they love, we move into yoga nidra, which is deep relaxation or waking sleep. It involves nothing more arduous than lying on your back with your eyes closed and following a guided meditation. which ends with some time in Shavasana, and then the blessing of peace, Shanti, and finally the phrase that ends all yoga classes, Namaste. Yoga Nidra helps to alleviate stress and anxiety, which are so prevalent among us these days. But I found it to be even more powerful too. My sister died on October 1st, 2019, after a 5-month fight against a brutal uterine cancer that was only discovered when it had already spread through her body. I had gone up to St. Louis to see her 10 days earlier, and I knew it would be the last time. Already, she was mostly unconscious. On September 29th, I took a Yoga Nidra class at Southern Star that a friend was offering. And as I lay there at the beginning, I couldn't stop sobbing. I was trying to be quiet, but completely devastated. Eventually, I passed out. That's the only way I can say it. I entered a darkness deeper than sleep. And when at last I regained consciousness, I knew that I had found my sister in that darkness, that place beyond identity, where though we do not know it, we are one. That was the only place I could find her any longer. But it was there beneath all things. And while I'm still part of time, that knowledge comforts me. Spring in Mississippi is gorgeous. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I spent a lot of time on my front porch, sitting in the rocking chair and watching my pots of flowers. I worked on a series of poems, and I've taken the titles off them, but I'd like to read a few of them. The first one: I'm tired of saying, oh, the birds, listen to the birds, as once again they parcel out the sky. I want to feel how their songs are gifts, and the leggy pansies running to seed near the end of their season, and the 3 strawberries I've managed to grow, each partly rotten or eaten, the snapdragons and dianthus, mint, the orangey pink geranium, marigolds, lantanas, raindrops after storm dripping from the eaves, the squirrel that just bounded across the yard and ran up the crepe myrtle, the sloosh of cars driving past the wet street, and a memory so early I don't even know if it's true. Myself lying in a high single bed in a hotel, watching the blurred reflection of streetlights in the window as their lozenges of color changed, hearing that same wet sloosh, the mystery that surrounds us, the otherness of lives passing on the night street, as I lay cocooned in my parents' love, in the lights, the rain, and now here in this fraught season, the fine mesh and delicate tracery of leaves on trees so huge they nearly blot out the white sky. Behind this, the battered sun, my flowers in their pots lining the old brick walkway to the 4 steps, the porch of this ramshackle Mississippi house, the rocking chair. So we live close to Magnolia Grove, which is a Thich Nhat Hanh monastery. Of all things in northern Mississippi, it's pretty terrific and I love it. See how quickly it has changed. Without people, the sky is clean again, and all day long birds clamor and music. I'm on my deck in my underwear, starved for sunlight. A woodpecker drills at a telephone pole, and 2 cardinals dive bomb each other through the privet. A world empty of people, just uninterrupted grass, Lawrence wrote 100 years ago, and a hare sitting up, ready to bound, alert and quivering. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. The monks and nuns sing, standing in a circle beneath the trees at Magnolia Grove, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in Mississippi. And today, I'd like to sit with Sister Boy and Sister Peace, eat vegetables and tofu, then wash my bowl in a series of pans: dirty water, soapy water, rinse water, clear, clear like this sky, like the breeze in which the daylight swims. A robin flies to the maple tree. A young stag at dusk, white tail flicking, eating flowers heaped on a raw grave, raises his head to watch us before he vanishes slowly into the trees. Outside the kitchen window, my peace roses ride on arching stems like moons in a lead white sky. All year, earth holds them. I ignore them. Night thickens among the branches of ginkgo, maple, willow oak, cherry, redbud, and the thicket of bamboo that surround this wooden house. Sometimes I am afraid. At 3, I knelt on the back seat of my mother's car, and looking out the window, I said, there's so much to see and so little time to see it. Or so I've been told. It's like that now, watching the leaves. Bread rises in the oven. May the stag sink back into the forest. May the petals drop on the grass. Whoever you are, may you be at peace in this great silence where only the birds speak. And then I'm going to close with one more real short poem called When You Come to Love. When you come to love, bring all you have. Bring the milk in the jug, the checked cloth on the table, the conch that sang the sea when you were small, and your moonstone rings, your dream of wolves, your woven bracelets. For the key to love is in the fire's nest, and the riddle of love is the hawk's dropped feather. Bring every bowl and ewer, every cup and chalice, jar, for love will fill them all. And dazzled with the day, fold the sunlight in your sheets, fold the smell of salt and leaves, of summer, sweat, and roses, to shake them out when you need them most, for love is strong as death. So thank you.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anne. It's just wonderful to hear you read. I love what happens to your voice when you're shifting from prose into the poetry, and we're just hearing this kind of deep connection, the groundedness in your voice there. I love how we're all reading. You know, everybody here just has this very beautifully grounded way of reading. I just adore that. It's so rare that we get to hear people who read really well, and I'm just delighted with how everybody read. And now I'm going to read. So we'll see how that goes on. I'm just going to drop quickly into the chat something about me, which is kind of very hard to do all this stuff, but it's all very doable. We learned how to do all this stuff quite well. Okay. Here we go. Now I'm going to start my reading. So I'm going to read to you from my new book, Gut Botany. I'm holding up here a book with a beautiful sturgeon on it. So just imagine this beautiful dinosaur fish, a fish that's all over the Great Lakes here in Lake Michigan, and all along the Atlantic coast, all the way to Germany. It's kind of all over the place. I would like you to imagine this dinosaur surviving and moving through deep at the bottom of the ocean, deep in the rivers, deep in the lakes. Okay, so let's listen to her while you listen to me. All right. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Hot Springs, and it's a poem of healing. I live with chronic pain, and hot springs are indeed one of my sites of healing. Crystals invade my bones, my joints. Calm heat pressures raw nerves, red wounded sites, air chemicals repair tissue right now. Feet dangle in the waters, sip thick green. The lining of my mouth slurps from deep beneath the lake, salt-filtered excretion of a bony land, a homeopathy for my chasmed joints. Rocky cliffs, no purchase for soil. Accumulate the blow, the wind, trees bend, Do not try to stand up straight. Indigenous zones, rock trail after the erratic journey. Silica water rushes pearl kernels onto the land, onto my skin, slips through a hair follicle, bonds with tired calcium, frangible and dry, nestles in the splintery embrace. Make yourself this place, bones open into embrace, my face outward into the wind's curvature. Thank you. And my next poem is just called Hello. And it has an interesting and funny origin story. So Stephanie Haidt, my wife, and I, we were together at an artist residency in Oregon. And you're going to hear something about the artist residency and about being in a kind of Wi-Fi world, you know, online on these computer machines. And you're also going to hear something about the history of the land that we were on. And here's the epigraph for this poem. In 2008, Dennis Jenkins of the University of Oregon reported that he'd found human coprolites, the precise term for ancient excrement, dating 14,000 to 15,000 years old in a series of shallow caves overlooking an ancient lake bed near the town of Paisley. So that was written in the National Geographic in January 2015. And I was in this artist residency also on the ancient bed lake near the town of Paisley. So there was this old shit, and this poem emerged from the knowledge of this long, long habitation of the land. Hello. Someone did pass here in a band, a mob, someone who never knew what it meant to be alone. In vision quest or sanctioned lead of the hand, eyes dark and senses open to the burning sun. Pause for a day, and my bones and skin miss the light touch of the glass fiber, the screen caress, your affirmation of this, of writing, of a pace that mirrors yours, my reader. Instead, the pond stretches liquid, a V-shaped wave. My headphones etch out birds with Katie Lang. The cricket remembers the taste of the copper wire. Current murmurs along the highway behind my cabin. Shift my fingertips on the keys into her body on the horizon line. Meet the baton in the electronic print. Revolt, and here it stops. Someone did pass here, walked the land into their bones, each generation passing on their way from coastal harvest without longshoremen and harbor fire to ochre caves or a lush inland sea. An ancient alligator burrows into the mud and expires. Stop of wire Wi-Fi, the netted frame of day. Rest here, do not press the reload button, and still alone. Rest one night in a small cave, an overhang, barely protect you from the rays, morning shit bonded with calcite, dried. Salt eats into ancient seeds, skin gently cracked by digestive juice. DNA wove itself into a message rhythm, amino acids clouding one by one, amid rain and acid and rain and snow, sun-baked pearl lifts itself to the light. What becomes of the writer's cottage on the dry lake rim? Whose bodies shapeshift protest in nuclear futures? My keyboard sips the juice. The black snake in the sky hums and waits, slips into the wrinkle before the generator thrums once again, a downward stroke. Someone beats utopia out of my sister's skull. Alone, we stitch the line as best we can, our hands raised up to the sun, my feet on the salty lines of the alkaline desert. Hello, she said, 15,000 years later. Hello, my Mars rover, my metal plate. And Eve extends her hand as if I could decode in writing the prayer on her lips, a call for the bird, for the bison, for the skin that would guide her to the other world, of the message freed, circling amid the outer stars, meteor shot back to the forest of urban strife. The policeman's bullet from the future desert, hold her saliva drop, eyelash, smear from the growing cells of her cervix. Here you rest, sweet one. Thunderbird booms across the horizon. Metal pierces, sunspots, radiant warmth. Okay, and I'm going to end on a last poem. It's a sequence called Bug Junction. And the story of the book, Gut Botany, is a story of healing from sexual assault. And the writing of it, like all poetry book writing, took a long time. And the time passing is here marked through the names of moons. And the names I took respectfully from Anishinaabe names for the months. And I'm using the English form here. So on the page, you'll see the little stanza that I read. And at the bottom of the page, it says the moon. So you get the sense of time passing as the poem runs along. So it's called Bug Junction. Red dragonfly segmented, shelves of torso, pelvis fly, phyla structures a discursive regime I name ancestral knowledge. Wild rice moon. I cannot look you in the eye. Segmented multitudes reflect no ego spreads through antennae, sensitive bristle, foot pad hair. Leaves changing color moon. Skin eye, hair eye, plates turn against one another, white glutinous pivot. Where do you touch me? Leaves falling moon. We meet. Moments, hairs out, a line along my pelt. Then we part. Velcro hairs tug hooks under my skin, raise a bruise. Freezing over moon. We lift off from one another, molecules twinned, a touch archaeology decoded by pathologists. Were we to die here, splayed yards from one another by the lake? Little spirit moon. I am not spared precarity in my occupation of indigenous lands. I cannot see the lake the way you root, drum, burn the chitin and alarm. Big spirit moon. We live, you and I, hooks and all, our touch plates out, hum armor invitation, a heartbeat, lean in, tonight, the sturgeon satellite. Suckerfish moon. Sleep weaves melatonin waves, red blood, white blood, pulse, pulse. Older insects hum 1,000 dark eyes in our dream. Crust on the snow moon. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. And that was our hour of poetry. It was wonderful to have you as companions for this reading. I'm saying so many thanks for the wonderful women on the screen here. I'm just going to check if we're all on the screen now. Let's see. Yeah, there we are. Wonderful. And thank you once again for DJ for being like the best with all the tech. It's amazing. I know you have it. And thanks everybody for your wonderful readings. I think these just intersected in beautiful ways. And I'm so glad we did this tonight. Thank you. Yay. And thank you everybody for being audience.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you, DJ. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Margaret.
Absolutely. It was great to see you all.
Yay.
Great to hear you all.
Yeah.
Miigwech.